Hi, here on Pixel Studios, and today we're going to take apart the animation of this logo. Let's take a look. The company itself is a creative marketing agency, and it was important for them to cover all the areas of the company that they do. Specifically brand development, where we show it through the monitor screen and flying pieces of paper. Photos, where we used a camera that takes a picture. More, to show the event, we showed that through a balloon that flies down. Another company does a variety of business services like prints, custom t-shirts and packaging, and we showed that here through a box that the final logo flies out of. The main goal was to show the animation in a simple and impactful way, to use simple, easy to understand shapes, at the same time to preserve the meaning of everything that is happening. Look inside the animation and see what it consists of. At the very beginning we see a laptop that opens up and pieces of paper fly in. The laptop itself looks like this. We have a static camera, and also the 3D layers are the bottom, the display and the background. Since the layer itself is flat in After Effects, we've added a lid like this on top. It's a regular shape layer that's animated with path. With this layer we create fake 3D pieces of paper that fly out from behind the monitor and fly into the screen-made sheets using the program Cinema 4D. Well, you can do it and the usual 2D layer. The layer with the monitor we have animated by scale. As the pieces of paper fly in and out of the right and left side, we have a tilt deformation. This is done with the bended effect. We can create an adjustment layer and all the layers below will be affected by this effect. Here we've placed the right points and animated it the way we want it. During the transition from the monitor to the camera, we use the shape morphing technique. We keep some large distinctive part, like the monitor display. And this monitor shape repeats the shape of the camera body. This transition is smooth and effective. After the transition we have the camera body and additional elements start to appear. These are the lens, the top button, the flash, and the viewing area. That said, to keep the camera in the animation from being boring, we've made the button click as if it's taking a picture. These are simple shapes that we drew inside of After Effects. Here this button is animated by position. The lens, like all the other elements of the composition, is also drawn using shapes and animated parametrically using the size and stroke width parameter. With these parameters we can do animations like this. While this button is being pressed, we can see the whole camera shrinking and stretching. This is one of the 12 principles of Disney animation. It allows us to make the movements more interesting and spectacular. We created a regular null object, snap all objects to it and animate the scale parameter. After this action ends, we switch to the balloon. While keeping the same shape, this is the camera body. We can change it parametrically with the size parameter. In doing so, when we modify it, we keep the line thickness. If we did it with the scale parameter, the line thickness would change. As this body goes down to the bottom, we can see that it's clinging to these ropes and kind of pulling back a little bit. We're preserving the momentum of the motion and repeating the physical properties of the object. In order to realize the appearance of this balloon at the top, we did it with the usual layer order and fill. If we turn on the alpha channel we can see that there's a white fill here. If we don't need it, we can just duplicate the layer, disable stroke, and make this a mask that we can use with the track matte parameter. We've anchored the entire balloon to the first layer, which is the control layer. Using the parent and link parameter, we used the standard position, scale, and rotation parameters. Don't forget, to keep smooth movements, we need to use Graph Editor all the time. Without it, the animation will be very clumsy and linear. If you don't see that graph, we can switch to it here and turn on the ones we want. Also, to show the movement of this balloon, we've added these lines that go from the bottom to the top. They're animated with the trim path parameter. These lines are just enough to show the movement of this balloon. That it's moving somewhere. And that movement will be more than readable. We use the minimum of means and get the maximum of expression. That's the golden rule of motion design. To transition to the next scene, we have a simple story. Our ropes come off and this rectangle rushes to the bottom. It falls to the ground and it's a pseudo 3D. In order to do this pseudo 3D effect, we didn't translate anything into 3D or model anything. It's all done by adding just one line. We can draw any shape we want, add any thickness we want, and animate its path parameter as we want. This technique of simple 3D boxes is used to animate houses, square shapes, and so on. We can use this method in different cases. Before this box opens, we have a preparation for the action. As you can see, it shrinks before it opens. This is to prepare the viewer for the action because we don't have any external force that's acting on this box. The box lid itself is made with shapes and animated with the path parameter. We've also bound it to the main shape. And that's enough to competently manipulate all the layers. Here we also repeat everything in a 3D effect, although there's no 3D here. When we have the letters fly out and land, we have the last letter M drawn. We did this with the stroke effect. You can draw a mask on any object like this. Use the stroke effect and use these parameters here. We're animating through the end parameter. In order to make it convenient to animate such shapes, we divided the letter M into 4 parts in Adobe Illustrator program. We prepared these shapes in advance so that it would be convenient for us to animate it. All the other letters that fly out and land are animated using the default parameters: position, scale, and rotation. On each of these letters also uses overshooting. We do it using expression and scale parameters. The overshooting itself we can apply using the Free Motion Tools panel script. Using this button here. Once everything is animated, we can add additional elements. These are the lines that are animated using the trim path parameter. We animate the start and end parameters from 0 to 100, do a little offset on the keys. And we modify the graph editor. Here we can also animate the stroke width parameters to make the lines disappear more smoothly. If you don't use stroke width, the animation will look something like this. We've added lines like this here when the button is pressed. Added lines like this when we have the balloon popping off. And during the landing of this box. You can also add lines like this to support the shape of objects. And to shift all the attention to this particular object. It makes the animation more interesting and it keeps the motion and the shape. Generally, during each animation we should repeat the physical properties of the object, but we can and even sometimes we should hyperbolize some actions. For example, when we click the camera button, the camera itself shrinks and stretches. Although in real life, it can't do that. And here, when the paper flies into the computer monitor, it also tilts left and right. We need to preserve the physical properties of the objects, but we can hyperbolize and slightly disrupt their physical properties to make the animation more expressive. Also, before we start this kind of animation, we need to determine what shapes we're going to have as the main shapes and what shapes we're going to have as additional shapes, whether we can transform from one object to another and back again. Is it technically feasible? These are questions that we should always ask ourselves before we start, and also we need to keep the same style of all the objects. All the main lines of our objects are the same thickness. And we need to stick to it. So we ended up putting this animation into pre-compose and adding all the sounds that we need. Here we used a simple scale parameter to add a little bit of a bounce effect. Also, when working in After Effects, if we're adding sound right here. In the Effects tab, we have an audio option. We can use all of these effects on soundtracks. Experiment with them and see what you can achieve with these effects. We ended up with this logo animation. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next lessons.